Thank you. Thanks, Karen, for that introduction. I don't know whether my wife wants the world to know we met on a blind date, but it was a good blind date. It's interesting, I've changed roles. So when I was writing this book, I was with Sloan in a thing called the Initiative on the Digital Economy. It was the first book really that put a handle on this idea of digital transformation. And we've learned a lot over we're now in our 9th year of research on digital transformation. But a few years back, I realized that one of the things digital was doing was starting to reshape jobs, sometimes destroy jobs, and that I wanted to do something about that. For the last year, for another year or two, I will then be focusing on trying to figure out now, in addition to this digital transformation work, the culture work we've been doing, try to do a little bit more on skills also. So I'll tell you just a little bit about that at the end. We want to focus most of this on digital transformation, what that means for companies, how you think about that from your role, and we'll do a little bit on skills at the end. Right? Oh, I guess one other thing to think about, though, is, Dhaval was talking about the cognitive supply chain. In a way, we are part of a different kind of cognitive supply chain, right? The idea of getting knowledge, creating knowledge, and then helping students pick that up, or helping those people who read our stuff to pick that up and use it. So that's what I'll play, that kind of a digital cognitive supply chain role right now, to just give you some information, and hopefully it will help you do great things back at the office. So where is my slide? There we go. So digital innovation is accelerating. How many of you know Moore's Law? Great. You know Moore's Law then. Great. Technology doubles in power every 18 months or so. Sometimes 24, depends on what it is. That means, just as a rule of thumb, if it's every 18 months technology doubles, that means every 5 years technology is 10 times as good as it was before. Every 10 years, it's 100 times as good as it was before. That means if you are starting your 5-year plan, you are already 10 times out of date when you start. We need to think differently about how we run organizations, how we think about technology in that situation. But I have so if you think about Moore's Law, here's just an idea on how fast things are moving. This is about 2 years ago, right? Software summarizes text surprisingly well. In the technology press, surprisingly well is we're surprised it does it at all, right? So then what do we mean it does it better? Well, here it's as good as the average American high school student, not much longer. And what about jobs where you do a lot of reading? Well, now computers are better than the average lawyer at reading non-disclosure forms. We have no idea whether that is because the computers are better. I think more likely when you give a person 25 non-disclosure forms, they fall asleep really fast, and computers never do that, right? But then what else is happening? In medicine, you can smell somebody's breath and see if they have cancer. What does that mean for doctors? Here's the first place I've seen where computers are replacing doctors in diagnosis. Now, this is a certain kind of doctor. The American lobby for doctors is very, very strong. This is a kind of doctor, an optometrist, which does not have a strong lobbying thing. So this will be the first. We'll see what else happens. But you go through this thing and you say, if computers are destroying jobs, what's safe? I think I found one. If you're a poet, you're in pretty good shape. Okay? Unfortunately, if you're a poet, you're not making any money, so you're doing something else also. But actually what's happening in many cases is we're not destroying jobs, we're changing jobs, we're moving pieces of jobs. And so, for example, here, the Walmart robot, this robot runs around the Walmart store looking for empty shelves. That's a really pretty boring job for somebody to do. The robot's happy to do it all day, and that frees people up to do other things. So that's more what we're going to be doing, is the routine, boring parts of jobs. The dangerous parts of jobs will be going away. So if you do routine or boring work, yeah, you will lose your job. But hopefully the routine, boring part of your job goes away and it just stays more interesting, of course, more competitive, harder work, more pressure, all those good things too. But you'll still have a job, right? So that's what we think about with Moore's Law. I want to give you another law, though, as we think through the digital transformation concept. I want to tell you that technology is not really the problem in digital transformation. So if I gave you Moore's Law before, here's George's Law. Technology moves quickly, but organizations change much more slowly. Okay? It's a fundamental law of any kind of technology transformation, but we tend to forget it over and over again. And so what this means, when you think about those two words, digital transformation, digital's not the problem, transformation is the problem. So as the technology people are coming at you and telling you how wonderful this stuff is and just plug it in, it's going to work, you know they're wrong. They know they're wrong. we got to figure out how to get the organization part to change, to go with it. And that means that the digital transformation is not really a technical problem, it's really a leadership problem. And that's what we discovered in this research. We went out and we talked back in 2010, this is how long ago, we were doing this research before digital transformation was even a thing. And we were hearing about technologies like social, mobile, analytics, IoT, these kinds of things. We were hearing them out there in the press, often from the same either wonderful technology companies or from some startups that had really good PR groups. And we decided to try to figure out what about the rest of the world. So this was at the time, remember in the US, the 99% problem, the 1% and the 99, remember? So we decided to go after the 94% of the economy that was not technology, software, or media companies and figure out what they were doing. We found a lot of companies. I interviewed 150, my team interviewed 150 leaders of billion-dollar organizations over a year in 51 companies. We found a lot of companies doing a lot of things with digital. We found very few doing it well. And the ones that were doing it well, we call them digital masters. And the digital masters do two things better than other companies. One they do is a digital capability. And the digital capability means not you do mobile or AI better. It's that you are using technology to drive change in your customer experience or your operations or your business models better than others. So how much are you putting the new innovation in to change the way you deal with customers? That's the way you think about this, or operations or business models. But the next question is the leadership side. They're better at envisioning and driving change over and over again in the organization. So as a business professor, we discovered these two things. As a business professor, the first thing I have to do is give you a 2x2. It's part of my union contract, so you get your 2x2 there, right? The next thing is, you know how we teach these things. You want to be up there. You don't want to be down in the beginners. If you're in the beginners, don't be there. And if you are there, don't tell anybody, okay? But any good business professor worth his or her salt will spend a lot of time talking about the off diagonals. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll just say it pretty quickly. The top left. The top left there, these are companies doing a lot of digital without the leadership. So they're doing a lot of different experiments. They're not tying them together. They're not learning from those experiments. They're not learning across their organization from what they do. My favorite company that we studied is a very good company that did 3 different mobile marketing experiments. All 3 of those experiments worked. And instead of choosing one, they kept all 3 going. 3 times the infrastructure, 3 times the number of vendors, 3 times the data management problems, and 3 times the annoyance for their customer base. So, and another one, 4 different collaboration platforms, they couldn't collaborate with each other. So we call these fashionistas because they're all beautiful and digital on the outside. There's just nothing going on up here. And you know the fashionistas in the world, right? By the way, I said that at a retail conference a couple weeks ago. Bad thing to say at a retail conference. So that's them. The other side, the conservatives, this is not a political statement. It's the other meaning of conservative. They're being too careful. You know in innovation you will fail. You know in innovation you will waste money. That's part of the innovation process. These people are too careful to keep everything in line, too careful to keep everything coordinated and synchronized, so they can't innovate. They never fail, but they don't innovate either. So that's the conservatives. They're just being too careful. So the next thing we did, as a business professor who hangs around with a whole bunch of economists, we ran some financial numbers. And we found 184 publicly traded companies that are doing, that we could put on our survey. We could put them somewhere in this 2x2. We compared companies in a quadrant to other other $500 million companies in their same industry. Retail against retail, bank against bank, B2B manufacturer, B2B manufacturer. We did not throw them all in a bucket and see what rose to the top. We compared industry by industry, and we found on average that the 2 dimensions are associated with 2 different kinds of performance in firms. So on the left, digital capability. The better you are at digital capability, the better you drive revenue through your capacity. You can see that fixed asset turnover, revenue per employee, 6 to 9% better than the average company in their industry. That's interesting, but it's not everything. On the other side, the companies that lead better, on the right-hand side, are 9 to 26% more profitable than peers in their industry. More profitable on profit margin, EBIT margin. So that's interesting, but it's not the whole story. The masters driving more revenue at a higher profit margin. That's neat. That means if you're in an industry that has a 4% profit margin, the masters are running at 5%. And for billion-dollar companies, you know how hard it is to pick up that extra percent of profit. If you're in a 10% industry, the masters are running at 12.5%. But look at the fashionistas, driving more revenue at a lower profit margin. They're looking, hey, look, we're driving customers. We're not making as much money. Okay? And look at the conservatives. Hey, we are more profitable than our peers, 9% more profitable than our peers. But look at the revenue numbers. They're not innovating. So how long do you think that profit will stay there if they're not innovating? If they're a monopoly, it's one thing. Otherwise, they probably should pick up the innovation piece. Now, I can't tell you which the way the causality runs. We don't have that kind of data. Nobody with the kind of data I've got can tell you. If they do tell you, they're wrong. But I can tell you this. Companies, the best run companies in the world, the most profitable, the highest driving revenue, seem to run digital like that top quadrant. So I can't tell you whether it's causal, but I can tell you it looks like best practice. You want to be up there. So you want to improve your digital capability, you want to improve your leadership capability. How do you do that? I've got a book on that. And so we'll be signing that book afterwards. And what I've tried to do is boil it down to 5 things. The hard thing about doing research like this is you spend a couple years, in this case 3 years, figuring out what we're talking about. You try to develop the one-page picture, and this is the one-page picture on how to do this well. And then after 3 years, you write a book. So you turn it into 300 pages, 250, 300 pages. And then you get 35 minutes to present the whole thing. So I boiled it down to 5 things that you need to do to make this thing work. Oh, but before we do that, I got to tell you about my favorite company in the whole research. Anybody know Asian Paints? If you did you grow up in India? The only people that know Asian Paints grew up in India. Nobody else in the world knows who they are, which is good for me because I can tell the story. It's not so great for Asian Paints. But I discovered them through this research. If you were Asian Paints and had to draw your order to cash, this is easy, right? You can draw this on a napkin. And so, somebody comes in and they order paint, or in this case, I couldn't find paintbrushes, so she walked away with a rake, okay? But
it's just a really old brush.
There you go. She goes home, they run out of stuff, they talk to the sales guy. Sales guy puts an order into the distribution center, distribution ships. You know all about this, you're in this business, right? 13 different ways in 13 different regions. Why 13 regions? Because when Asian Paint started, you could not get around the regions in India. Makes sense. Why 13 different ways? Because a fundamental fact of organizations is if you create 2 organizations doing the same thing, give them a couple years, they will be doing different things. It just happens. So they said about 10 years ago, hey, we can fix this. We're wasting a lot of working capital. Let's put an ERP system in place. I don't need to explain to you what an ERP system is. And that was cool. Freed up a lot of working capital, standardized the process. Still 13 regions, but doing the same process now. That gave them a lot of information to improve process. But then they said something that I hear over and over again with our digital masters. That was interesting. What else can we do now? What did they do? They said, hey, we're India. Let's create a call center. India's really good at call centers, right? Now, why did they create the call center? Not because they needed a call center, but because there was a problem with the order process in retailers. Talking to that guy, that was a 15, 20-minute process. How are the kids? Hey, nice weather. How about that cricket score, right? Over and over again. And then you do 2 minutes of ordering. If you call a call center, it's just 2 minutes of ordering. You're done. So they put in the call center, you call her, you call the guy beside her, the orders get taken. The other problem, with 3,000 salespeople, not all of them will be great. But in the call center, they're all pretty good. So they put in the call center, what do we do with the salespeople? Well, the salespeople have to change jobs. They didn't fire the salespeople, but they say, listen, let's give you mobile, and your job is to become a relationship person. You fix problems. You know everything that's happening up to the minute. And by the way, you've got some free time, you're not taking orders. Go out and find more customers in your region. Not everybody made this transition. Some didn't make the transition, but the ones that did had a better job. By the way, who did they start discovering? construction firms, renovation firms, painting firms. They hadn't been selling as much to them in the past, but now they can. What else can we do? Well, now they got data, they can start to improve services, especially delivery times. They put in advanced manufacturing. What else can we do? Well, those construction companies, those painting companies, don't like coming to the distribution center to get their paint. Why not deliver right to the job site? Only company in India could do that. Very simple tweak once your processes are clean. What else can we do? Well, she doesn't need to wait for orders. She can call you every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. No problem. Or even better, she can call and say, I got some paint, I got a truck coming to your neighborhood. Should I put anything on it? Great, you never miss an order. What else can we do? Well, people are busy. They don't really want to paint their walls. They just want a painted wall. And so they become the Uber of wall painting in India. Pull up the app, tell them to come next Thursday and paint your wall, and one of their contractor friends will do it. Has anybody experienced this with Asian Paints? I've only heard about it. It's supposed to be amazing. Does it work?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. I love the whole idea. They don't own any of the assets. They only own the brand and the connections, and they make this thing work. I was there I think about a year ago, and I was asking, what are you going to do next? They said, well, there's a big industry in India that nobody owns more than 5%. We think we can get 15. I said, what's that? They said, well, you know how we're the Uber of painting? I said, yeah. They said, we're going to become the Uber of home renovations. So now they won't just paint the wall, they'll move the wall for you. They'll renovate your kitchen, they'll renovate your bathroom, they'll do that kind of thing. Okay? What else can we do? Well, why are we just doing this in India? They're in 17 countries now. So here's a really fascinating story. Over the course of 10 years or so, they went through multiple waves of innovation. And those waves of innovation took it from making paint 13 different ways in 13 different industries to making painting services and renovation services in 17 countries. That's pretty amazing. And if they can do it in as boring an industry as paint is, you can do this in any industry. But it takes a different kind of thinking. It takes thinking about what we've been doing in the past will not keep us going. It takes that push to try things. Some of these things failed along the way. And they said, fine, we'll start them again when we're ready. Very top-down push to make things better. Very bottom-up involvement of the people to help make these changes happen. And never being satisfied. Always being dissatisfied and saying, what else can we do? What else can we do? Yeah. So, here are the 5 things. 5 things that it takes to make this capability happen. Number 1, vision, projects, platform, governance, and culture. Okay. Vision. I am an engineer. I started my career making radars. I've spent 25 years, was it? I can't remember. No. I'm almost 20 years out of school now. I spent over a dozen years in industry and then many, many years in academia. I don't like this word vision. Vision seems to be one of those things that the top brass says when they're trying to get you to do something different. And usually my answer was always put my head down and I hope that vision goes away. Okay? Now, don't lie, you all feel the same way, right? And it usually did go away, because usually that boss went away before anything changed in the organization. So I never really believed in vision until I got my doctorate, and then it started to make a little bit more sense, because I realized my doctorate's in innovation, and companies don't innovate, people innovate, right? So the people became more important. And then in this research, it became more and more important. The companies that we studied all had a very strong vision for what they're doing, what they're going to do differently. They laid out a beautiful story for how you're going to be better in the future. Not only the company will be more profitable, but the customers will be better, the employees will be better if this happens. They made it legitimate to think differently in a certain direction. This vision, I cannot overemphasize this concept of vision. You got to get this right. You got to get something that everybody can believe in, otherwise they're going to fight you every step of the way. They're still going to fight you, but they won't fight you quite as much. Some of the people will come with you on this journey. So for example, Kaiser Permanente is a health management organization, a doctor's group in California. They decided their vision is not to treat you well when you come to the hospital, it's to keep you healthy wherever you are. What that means is if they got to get in a truck and come to your neighborhood and do blood pressure screening, they're happy to do that. If they can treat you in a drugstore as well as they could treat you in a doctor's office, they will do that. And if they can do phone support to help you not have to go anywhere, they will do that. They want to keep you healthy. They don't want to wait till you're sick and treat you. That vision, keep you healthy where you are, changes the whole way people think about what it means to be a hospital system. Nike. Nike doesn't want to sell you shoes. Nike wants to be part of your life. That means every conversation you're having about sports, they want to be part of it. Because if they are having conversations with you about sports, they're going to sell you a lot more than shoes. But that means all that investment in being part of those conversations becomes legitimate. Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto is a mining company. They want to create mines without miners. It's hard to find miners these days. People are a very expensive part of mining. By the way, they're probably not telling their employees that they're doing mines without miners. They're telling the employees more, we're creating a mine where nobody will ever get hurt again. Okay? Same idea. Take them out of the dangerous jobs, move them up to the jobs that are less dangerous. Fewer people want to be mine workers. Those jobs will still exist. You're just not going to be down there digging things and getting hurt anymore. So here, this vision. This vision is really important about let's make it better. The other thing you didn't hear me say was we will be the best company in the industry. You didn't hear me say we'll be the most profitable company in the industry. You heard me say the bumper sticker about how we're going to be different that you can believe in. So one of the problems is with this thing, you want to turn yourself from a caterpillar into a butterfly. You really will have superpowers because of digital. You will be able to fly. And unfortunately, most companies I talk to, they are not talking about butterflies with their vision. They're talking about being fast caterpillars. And if you're in an industry where your competitors can fly, it doesn't matter how fast you can crawl. These visions have to come from the top. Organizations tend to make their visions within the area that they control. The visions we're talking about tend to go across silos. It's got to come from the top and go down, and then your people start to fill in the details. So it's clear enough to set direction, but open enough that people can fill in the details on it. By the way, I want to tell you, I'm not ignoring you over there. It's just there's a line here I am not allowed to cross. So if you're feeling ignored, it's her fault, not mine. Okay? So that's the first vision. Butterflies, not caterpillars. Make this something people can believe in. Now, what about projects? There are so many wonderful examples of digital transformation out there. We, 5 years ago, created this thing we call the 9 Elements of Digital Capability. It's still a bestseller at Sloan Management Review. Here are 9 places you can look for great ideas with digital. In customer experience and operations, business models, yes, you can worry about top-line growth. You should. But the way to do that best is to know your customers really well, to integrate your offerings really well. And then your customers not only will buy, but they're going to come back and buy again. Operations, yes, you got to digitize your processes, of course. But what are you going to do with that? Are you enabling your workers to work differently because they've got information differently? Are you enabling them to work in a more autonomous way? What about performance management? Are you just managing last year plus 10%? Or are you actually using the numbers to figure out what you're doing? Are you doing that every day rather than every year? And the business models, yes, of course you want to be that new digital business. You want to be the Uber of your industry. Very likely you will fail. Not because I know anything about your companies, but almost everybody fails at those giant platform plays. So sure, try it. But what you want to do is the digitally modified stuff. How can you make your business model better with digital, even as you try some of those bigger things? And globalization, what I mean by that is acting as a more integrated company like Asian Paints did. Okay? Clean up that platform, clean up your processes, things just get better. So every industry has them. You've heard a lot of examples. I've given you some, there are more. Let me just talk about a couple here. In operations, oh, well, Caesar's Palace, for example. Caesar's Palace found their best customers were carrying smartphones. Their best customers, they call them whales, right? And the whales are the people that can spend $10,000 at the tables today and then come back tomorrow and spend another $10,000. So you think about NBA basketball players, right? You think about Mexican drug lords. In some places, it's Chinese government officials, right? These are the whales that enter these casinos. They want to treat them really well. The whales said, the whales are now, rather than getting somebody who hangs out with them all day, Caesars has made it so it's just as easy to have your phone be your concierge for you. Lower cost for Caesars, just as good for the whales. Right? How about in operations? One of my students at Pernod Ricard found out they had a fraud. Well, there was a fraud problem at Pernod Ricard. They now have labels they're putting on each of the bottles, so each bottle has a unique identifier for the fraud situation. He found out a way to connect that label into a forward-facing thing so that now if I give you a bottle of Pernod or a bottle of Absolute Vodka, you can scan it with a QR code and it'll say, "Happy birthday, I hope you love this bottle of vodka." A personal greeting card can go on each one. Kind of neat. He calls it the Internet of Bottles. I'll tell you a little bit more about operations. And then business models, I'll tell you a little bit more about that too. There are people that will come out and they will tell you, you have to choose between customer experience and operations. You cannot do both at the same time. My data doesn't show that. My data shows that you do something that makes sense to you, and you immediately jump on the new opportunity. And often if you do something in operations, the opportunity may be in customer experience or business models. If you do something with customer, that may lead you to operational changes. So my data says go back and forth all the time, just like Asian Paints did, and you're better off for it. So this happens all the time. CDM Smith, large construction company, they were using goggles to design these large hydroelectric dams so they could do them in 3D. One of the engineers said, "Hey, I spend too much time on airplanes. I'll put my goggles on, you put your goggles on 3,000 miles away. We'll meet inside the plan of that thing that has not been built yet. We can walk around inside like a video game." That's kind of neat. Next step, instead of giving plans to the city, and the city then takes a month to get back to us, we'll sit down with goggles with the city managers. They had to do some really fancy cloud computing to speed up their models. But now they can have a 10-minute design cycle, not a 2-month design cycle. Minor operational change led to a completely different customer experience. Okay? We're seeing this all over the place. Flextronics, great operations, now getting into the design and product business. You heard about Asian Paints. I want to show you an example on here. Anybody know DBS Bank?
Yep.
Singapore?
Yep.
Okay. So I was told that DBS back in the day, DBS was the worst of the top 5 banks in Singapore in terms of customer experience. And I was told that DBS stood for Dinosaur Bank of Singapore. Except when I finally started getting to know them and they trusted me a little bit more, they said actually in Singapore people said it stood for damn bloody slow. Not the kind of reputation you want the bank to have, right? So they said we're going to fix that. Let's create a new vision. The vision is let's make banking joyful. Now, I have no idea why anybody would ever want to make banking joyful. It's just not a joyful experience. But their point was, we make people miserable. What can we do to change that perception? And they said the first thing we want to do when we're going to make, basically anything we do to make banking unjoyful, tell us, we'll try to fix it. And one place we want you to look first, any place we make a customer wait. Tell us about that. Let's find 1 million hours per year of customer waiting time, and we will fix that. The employees jumped in, started suggesting a lot of things. The IT department started fixing a lot of things. The business started rearranging its operations in different ways to save 1 million hours of customer wait time per year. They got through that 1 million hours pretty fast. They're up to 250 million hours of customer wait time per year that they've saved. Every one of those wait times was an operational failure, either on the customer side or on the back end side, that no longer existed. Not only were the customers not waiting, the company was better. They turned it on to the employees. Happy employees lead to happy customers. Where do we make you wait? They're over over 200,000 hours a year of employee wait time that's gone. Okay? They moved from number 5 to number 1 in the industry. But the other thing that happened that's really fascinating is they made their bank so efficient by reducing these operational failures, by reducing the wait time. They only had 2 more points where a human was even in the loop. One was to verify your identity. The other was to handle customer problems. They went to India. They used the ID system in India, so they didn't need a person to verify. They said, if you go to our bank, you do a chatbot, not a person. No more people in the loop. They say that in India, at this DigiBank in India, that they can make money on you if you give them 500 rupees for a savings account. Now 500 rupees is what, like $9, something like that, $10? The typical bank fees in the US are like 20 bucks a month. but they can make money on you if you give them $10. Customer focused change led to operational changes. Operational changes led to more customer improvement. Customer improvement, those operational changes led to low cost, which they could then move to a low cost country and make money. This is what I mean about how these things jump together all the time. So that's the projects. You want to do the experiments to try these things out. You want to do the bigger projects to make this thing happen. You want to be building up the capacity kind of things also so you can do better. Hiring those AI people, building up the new technologies to try them out and make sure they work. But it's all in the project idea. The pilots, the infrastructure, the capability investments, and then the big investments you do to make changes happen. Okay. By the way, for business models, yes, you can try to be the Uber of your industry. Go for it. There are some simpler ones, some lower hanging fruit. Number one, bundle sizes. Tokyo Marine answered a question that I've always wanted answered. I love my sister to death, but she's a terrible, terrible driver. I would love to go to my car insurance company and say, hey, can you give me 3 days of insurance for my sister while she's in town? So it doesn't wreck me. Tokyo Marine can do that now. They've unbundled a year of insurance into days of insurance if you're already a customer. They'll sell you a week of insurance, a week of accident insurance within 10 miles of the ski hill if you want it that way. And other companies are doing that. Unbundling. Another one, getting data to the right place at the right time. Daimler trucks. You know the light, how many, when the check engine light goes on in your car, right? How many of you just swear loudly? So what do you do first though, when the light goes on? What do you do?
I take a picture of it.
It's just a light, it's just this check engine. What do you do next?
Pull over.
You pull over. You figure your car's broken, you should do something about it. That's fair. What do you do?
I don't do anything right away. I check the gas gauge.
Check the gas gauge. I turn it off, turn it back on again. Yeah. So you just don't do anything.
Schedule an appointment.
You schedule an appointment. So here's what, that one light gives 3 different answers. Right? If you don't do anything, you worry about it. If you do something, the dealer basically says the same thing every time. Give me $1,000, come back tomorrow, I'll tell you what I spent it on. Right? This light is meant to make you worry. But if you're a commercial truck driver, it's even worse because you're worrying a lot about your livelihood, right? So what did Daimler do? And more companies are doing this now on their regular cars. They basically put a cell phone on your engine. The light goes on, you call Daimler, Daimler calls your truck says what's wrong. All they had to do was get that one code off of the engine and into their decision-making process. They then called back with 2 answers. One answer is, no problem at all, let's just schedule an appointment. They're still going to get your money, but at a time convenient for you. The other is, hey, your truck's about to blow up, but 10 miles down the road, we've got a service station. We are ready for you. You will be done in 2 hours. Either way, they get your money. Either way, though, makes the customer happier. That's a good deal. And all they did was get that information from one place to another. How many places in your business do you have that problem? All right, next up, advanced pricing and risk. In America, we've got Flow, who rates your auto insurance by putting a box on the car and it watches you drive. Cabbage will download, they will give you a loan within 5 minutes in a bank. And the way they do that is they download all of your financial information from your QuickBooks, from your PayPal, from your banking account. They run all the numbers. They know your financial situation better than you do. This idea of using data to manage risk is already out there. Not enough companies are doing it. So where in your supply chain, where in your business do you have data that you can manage risk with better if you just do it? Okay? So these are the projects. I've just got a few minutes left to get at the rest of the 3, but luckily the rest of the 3 are faster to get at. Okay? Platform. I've said a few times, if your systems, if your processes, if your data are a mess, it's really hard to do this. Underneath my 9 boxes, I had the digital platform there. And some people split that. They've got the back-end platform and the front-end, thing on your website, right? But I'm just calling it the platform. If it's a mess, it's really hard to do things. It's hard to give a unified customer experience if your customer is defined 5 different ways in your system. I looked around for the best architecture picture I could find of platforms in the typical organization, and I think I found it. You ready? How's that? Does that look like your systems? Does that look like the way your processes look? So here's a problem. If something comes in the right-hand side, that one strand on the right-hand side, where does it come out on the left-hand side? We have no idea. And if you try to make a change in the middle, what else is going to be affected? No idea, right? But that's the state of our systems. So I will tell you, in a very technical way, if your processes and your systems look like spaghetti, you want to change them into lasagna. You want to have nice, clean layers of functionality that are well behaved. But then you want to go one step more. You want to go from lasagna, you want to change them into ravioli. Because then you've got pieces that you can arrange around in different ways and make a beautiful plate that works really well, right? You really want to go to Legos, but nobody eats their Legos. So ravioli is fine. Okay? So how do you do that? I heard over and over again from these CEOs, digital is fast, but our IT department is very slow. So we're going to have to do digital without the IT people in the room. Heard it over and over again. They were totally, totally wrong. None of the digital masters we found did it without their IT department. Sometimes the IT department was leading it. Often somebody else was leading it, but they were best friends with the IT people. Because how do you do this if you don't have the people in the room that understand the spaghetti? Often the IT people understand business processes better than anybody else in the enterprise. You can't leave them out of the room. But it also means the IT people had to learn to be different. The IT people had to learn what it means, what the business is about, had to learn what business vision means, not just technology vision. They had to learn to be faster and more agile. They had to earn the respect of the business people to be part of the conversation. And the business people had to change also. They had to make the IT people part of the conversation rather than making a decision and telling the IT people what you decided. There was change on both sides. But in the end, if you're working closely together, you can do great things. If you leave the IT people out of the room, it's very likely you'll fail, unless you're doing only something that's separate from the rest of the organization. By the way, the best symptom I can hear about whether this is not working is listen to people complaining. If the IT person is trying to argue to take functionality away from that digital person, if the digital person is trying to argue that they know things better than the IT person, you got to fix that. Because we see it all the time. You set up two people and one of them leaves pretty quickly, and you got to get these things working together. Okay? So, two more. Governance. Governance is a dirty word. What's the other word for governance? Bureaucracy. Paperwork. That's not what we're talking about here. What we mean in governance is how can you get the right level of sharing and coordination across the enterprise so that you don't become fashionista, or if you are fashionista, you start to become less of one. And so what we aim for is what are the right levels of sharing and coordination? You notice we did not use the word control. Okay? You often have somebody in charge of digital at the enterprise level. There's usually somebody at each business unit level who's in charge of digital, and then you need to make the coordination happen between them. At that shared digital unit, so this word chief digital officer or chief transformation officer or CIO or chief marketing officer, whoever's running this, you got to appoint that person. Somebody needs to own the vision. Somebody needs to own the governance process. Somebody needs to own the momentum. And then you got liaisons. You often have a shared digital unit that has some of the specialized talent there, some of the specialized tools there. Governance committees. Committees do not do anything. They're easy to set up. They don't do anything. So you need to have committees plus other things, and then things happen. The committee decides, the other people do. And of course there are resources. Sometimes money, sometimes talent, sometimes data that can be used at the center and reused in other places. So governance is a big challenge. You got to get it right. If you have good IT, digital governance looks like your IT governance. If you've got bad IT, fix the governance for both of them. Last one is culture. I could go on for a week about culture. I've been studying this for the last 3 years. Many companies are trying to figure out how to be as good as Amazon, as fast as Amazon, as agile as Amazon or Google or the others. I'm not sure you want to do that. Because you can't have the HR practices, the pay practices, the talent practices of Amazon and Google and those funds. But you can be digital enough. And so I have a new article just came out last month, 2 months ago, how to build a digital enough culture in your organization. We wanted to call it digital enough culture. The editors wanted to call it building digital culture in traditional organizations. But we basically say, listen, get your values right. Speed, impact, autonomy, and openness. And then you want to build some things, you want to preserve some things, you want to reorient some things. You want to build the rapid experimentation, self-organizing data orientation. That's agile. You want to preserve the integrity processes that the digital firms sometimes lose. You want to give your people some stability that they really want, that the digital firms don't always offer, or they're learning to offer. And you want to rethink what it means to be customer responsive or results oriented. Rapid, innovative, leading the customer, not asking the customer. I could go on for a week about this stuff. I'm just going on for the second. You can read the article. But that's hard work. It takes a couple of years to get there. We have digital culture assessments that we can do for different parts of your organization to help you understand who has the digital culture, who doesn't. All that stuff, you can just contact me to get that. But if you're starting, start with what I've said over and over again. Get your people dissatisfied. Have them constantly asking, what can we do now? How can we do better now? Okay? If you get them constantly asking and suggesting what you can do now, you're well along the way. So technology is the endless agitator of the business world. I'm going to tell you, you don't need a digital strategy. What you need is the capability to innovate, the capability to transform with digital. And so I've given you these 5 things: the vision, the projects, the platform. If you do these 5 things, you're well along the way to making transformation happen. Okay? So if I can tell you the next thing that we need to look at is the skills. As we transform, our people need to get new skills, and it's not just the AI skills. It's that sometimes working with systems differently, it's sometimes thinking about data differently, it's sometimes just moving from the routine to the non-routine. So what I'm doing in the Jameel World Education Lab right now is exactly this. We're trying to figure out how to get the right skills to the right people at the right time. We're doing all kinds of interesting research to get at that, and we'd love to have you join in that conversation. So if you're interested in that too, come talk to me about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, George.